Okay, let's get rolling. Good morning, everyone. I'm Susan Franceschini. I'm Executive Director for ThinkLA. Welcome to our Think Thursdays webinar series. We're thrilled to have you here with us today. We've got a great program lined up for you. A couple things before we get started, a few reminders to make sure to check out the ThinkLA website and be sure you're signed up for a newsletter. We've got some cool new things in development. You won't want to miss out on those things. Like everybody else, we're going virtual, so be sure to stay on top of that. We're fortunate to have a great group of media leaders with us today to share their insights, their perspectives, and a look to the future and what might actually afford us a unique opportunity to do things differently moving forward. So I'm looking forward to hearing about that. Joining us today are our panelists, Serena Duff, Executive Vice President, General Manager of Horizon Media, Daniele Kohen, West Coast Lead, Executive Director of Mindshare and Neo Media World, Paul Woolmington, CEO of Canvas Worldwide, and our moderator today is Mark Egan, Managing Director, West Coast of Mediacom. During the conversation, be sure to submit any of your questions you have. You know the Q&A button at the bottom of the Zoom screen. We'll answer those questions at the end of the presentation. Thank you all again for being here today. I'm going to turn it over. Started. Mark, it's all you.
Thanks, Susan. Welcome, everyone. Very glad to have you here. We'll start with just something so that the rest of the audience can understand your individual situations. And I want to know how you guys are doing and what your immediate work environment is like. We're all working from home in different ways. Some of us have little nooks. Some of us are working in dining rooms and living rooms. Give the audience a sense of how you're working and how it's working out for you. Serena, let's start with you.
Yeah, hi everybody, and thanks, Mark. It's been interesting. I've got two 14-year-olds, a husband, a dog. I mean, we're fortunate to have a lot of room, but I quickly discovered I can't work in the kitchen, dining room area. There is absolutely no respect for my personal space. My kids shoo me out of their rooms if I pop in when they're in class, but they can just walk into my meetings with whatever they need. So we have a guest room off in the corner of the house, which I'm in now. I've taken that and hopefully we'll go in uninterrupted with this call. But just the whole of personal boundaries, the whole lack of that workspace, home space, it's just kind of this chaotic mashup. No matter how much structure I try to put around it, every day just becomes super unstructured. And for me, that's been challenging. I like complete separation between home and work. And, you know, that's been a struggle.
Yeah, I understand. My dog definitely has no sense of personal space right now. Daniele, how are you doing?
Hi, Mark. I'm doing well, generally speaking. I think everybody seems to be saying that, you know, the last was difficult. For myself, my wife, it's probably been the first week. That's been a massive shift for us. We were probably not ready. Felt like I was in work mode, you know, right away as I was the week prior to the crisis. So it took us, you know, a good week to adapt, and then from that second week onward, things have changed, sort of clicked. We got to sort of coordinate the kids, take time. She also has a big job as well, so it's been difficult. It's actually been a crescendo. I don't think I've ever spent as much time with my kids, and I don't think I would have ever spent as much time with my kids. So that's been definitely a huge silver lining for myself. Never had so many consecutive meals with the family together. If every Sunday we kind of ask them whether they're ready to go back to school the day after, and they say no. That's been kind of our benchmark. So if the kids are happy, we're fine. So it's been obviously kind of surreal, but we've seen, at least in our household, you know, lots of positive, and I think we got used to it from just, you know, adapting.
Awesome. Paul, tell us about your situation.
Well, thank you. Firstly, blessed, and we myself are okay and well, and to everyone who's tuning in, obviously a lot of empathy because of this situation we're in. But coming back to that theme, I've found that I've got into the groove. I'm one of those 50% that actually has adapted very well to this. somehow the chaos of the family. I mean, I've got a senior at school. I've got my daughter's at college, and we got 2 dogs, but we got enough space. We escaped out of the city, and so we're kind of in a rural environment, so we've got a lot of space. I've taken over largely the kitchen, so you can kind of see there's a fireplace behind over there, and people do wander through. I mean, it's probably the worst place to be, but it's actually worked out pretty well. You know, I commute. I mean, it's just nice to have, you know, the gang around me, and that's been, you know, to have the family. We've been able to kind of support each other has been pretty cool. But I agree with Daniele. It's like my family. I mean, I've had to adjust my, you know, being, you know, always on. You know, you got to kind of balance. You know, chill out, Dad. It's good. I've given my daughter and son total permission to, you know, give me a bit of a check here and there, and it's been appreciated. But all is good. All is good. And definitely early days. You know, I'm a very positive person, and I'd say that, you know, there was that negativity, the dark thoughts. But I think as we've got used to this, I would say the pendulum has definitely swung for me to a more positive outlook. Definitely those early days felt quite dark now in retrospect, but I'm sure everyone would say the same. But anyway, thanks for asking.
Terrific. And we'll come on to, in a bit, some of those optimistic thoughts and how we think our business is going to transform for the better on the back of this. But right now, let's talk about, you know, beyond the personal workspace and construction and yard people and all this and that. What are the biggest challenges that you all are facing at work? And you know, I know that can take any angle, right? There's client challenges that we have. There's operational challenges that we have. There's the reality of mental health challenges that all of our people are facing. What are you seeing out there? Daniele, let's start with you.
Yeah, sure. But you've touched on mental health. I think, you know, while I said before that I had a lot more time to focus on my kids, I also had a lot more time to focus on work. And I think it's just because, you know, all of those dead moments are gone. You know, forget about, yes, the commute, of course, but also the small little things like, you know, moving from one conference room to the other, from one meeting to the other, going down the food trucks to get something to eat, and then coming back, you know, going to the dry cleaner. So right now, life essentially just, you know, centered around 2 things: works and family and works, I should say. Just that. And so there are days where you know, I just the move. From, you know, 3, you know, being handing over lunch from my wife. So that's been a challenge. From a work standpoint, obviously, you know, having to deal with an unexpected crisis, both in terms of clients and just having our people adapting from doing buying and stewardship of companies to, you know, helping them brainstorming ideas, feeding them with POVs and thought leadership, and then just communication, just trying to keep it calibrated. You know, first few weeks it was all about checking in and being over communicative. You know, you fast forward 10 weeks where now people had a little bit enough of that. I'm also hearing that, you know, some offices are using Fridays as casual Fridays without even turning their cameras on. So that all sort of goes all around sort of the mental health effect, and, you know, the need for us to being able to parse out more now than ever, you know, life and work. So I would say that's been the big on our side and my side.
Yeah, mental health, definitely something I think touching all of us. Paul, what do you think?
Yeah, and I'd agree with a lot was previously said, but I think the number one challenge is culture. I mean, without that, we're nothing. And I'd say nurturing, enriching. My sleepless nights have been about, obviously, the existential things, but really fundamentally the number one challenge, I think, has been really thinking how we, in this unusual circumstance, nurture the culture, over-communicating. How do we remain connected? We're a network of 6 offices. We have a huge office in Playa Vista, and but big office in New York and growing office in New York, and and outliers, Dallas, Atlanta, and Chicago, and in fact now one in Denver. But it is all about that. So I would say, we've over communicated, we've done everything we can at every level to engage. So it's not just top down, it's bottom up as well. Surveys, the whole shooting match. But all of that is in service of making sure that we feel like we're one canvas, that we're one community, that we're all tackling this, to use an overused, stronger together. I think the second thing is the biggest challenge that we're going to face is that the economy is a bellwether for advertising. I mean, we're clearly a historically, holding company. Stock price is often very, very aligned to the general stock price, but the economy at large, I think the other big factor that really I'm spending a lot of time really thinking about is how we're going to outthink what is generally going to be a very depressed marketplace, an economic downturn, unprecedented levels of unemployment, unprecedented levels of consumer lacking confidence. So, the duality of that. So a little bit about our culture, which I think everything else will flow from, and then the broader marketplace, those really big threats that we're going to have to face today and really over the next year.
So we've touched on mental health, culture, and financial conditions. Serena, is it the same for you? Is there anything different?
Definitely been the same. We've had all those challenges. I'd say our biggest focus has really been on mental health. I'm someone who loves to have personal contact with my teams, and for me that means in person, physically, and so not having that has been a challenge. Being worried about the folks who are living alone, being worried about parents with young children and how they're coping with getting their work done while at the same time trying to manage 3 children under the age of 7. And so we've, I know we, me and my HR team, we've done a lot of outreach because people don't necessarily volunteer that they're struggling. And now, of course, my dog is barking. Had one employee whose wife is a nurse. She was working full time at the hospital. He was taking care of a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old, and just really getting down about how he could get his work done. And, by reaching out to him and having a conversation, we moved work off his plate. So really making sure that we're taking care of our people, because these are tense times and there's such stress, and we don't want them to have that added stress. How do you work out flexible hours? Someone was having a hard time sharing child rearing responsibilities with her spouse, and so she decided, look, he needs to work in the morning, so I'm going to be with the children. I'm going to work in the afternoon, and just knowing that they work for a company that is flexible to all of their needs has been not to meet those needs, but checking in on everyone and making sure they're okay has been hugely important.
Yeah, I think you touched on something really important, and I know for me, listening goes beyond sort of audio and hearing what people say. It's seeing people in the office, seeing their body posture, seeing how they're behaving. Are they up? Are they down? And I don't have that. So, when you said people don't necessarily volunteer these things, that leads to my next question. And I'll start with you. How do you collect that feedback? How do you keep on the pulse of what's important to them and feeling like you're in tune?
So one thing I've done personally, and I started this from day one, I send out a very personal email. I've had to stretch as a leader. I've had to be a lot more vulnerable, a lot more open, and really let people into my personal life. While I've always feel like I've been emotionally connected with my team, I've always kind of had a line between personal and business. And so from day one, I started a daily email. It's my morning musings. And it really is it's a little bit of journaling for me, but it also lets I talk about what's challenging me. I talk about what's challenging me from a business standpoint, from a personal standpoint. I let them know when I have good days and bad days. I let them know when I take time off and just get in the car and head up the coast to clear my head. I add a lot of humor to it. And the feedback I get is, thank you so much. I've been feeling really down. I'm having a hard, or I'm having a hard time balancing. Like today's email, I basically said, I'm sick of my family. We've had way too much together time, and I put them up for rent. And I said, for all those folks living alone, if you would like a family to come move in with you, they're yours, and I can do contactless delivery. And I got one note back from a young mother who was like, oh my God, thank you for saying that. She has an 11-month-old baby, and she's kind of like at that point where, she hates to say it, but she can't stand the kid right now. I mean, of course she loves her baby, but she's having a really hard time. And she just sent me this really long email where she was able to express how she's feeling. And I'm going to reach out to her today and have a bigger conversation. But the lovely thing is it's created just a forum for conversation and outreach, which has been really, really nice.
I love that. That's great to share. Paul, what do you think? How do you compensate for that lack of connectivity?
Yeah, no, I thought Serena nailed it. I think that, that vulnerability is an important part of giving people the permission, showing your vulnerability as leaders, and I would call it in the plural. So I think we're all HR at the moment. It feels to me as if the entire leadership team has a role in that. It's not, we're all in that together, to be checking in, to be allowing people to be vulnerable, to have the conversation that, the unspoken part of the conversation. And I think we're doing it. I feel like the feedback's great, and I think we're approaching it as if, as a leadership team, we're all, we're not just trying to get the job done, and certainly that's an important part of it, but really trying to nurture people and it is Mental Health Month, so obviously all the other things that we can do, giving guidance, having forums where we can get experts in, we can talk about mental. I think for the younger population in a lot of our agencies, and it goes across the board, but I feel like they may never have faced these kind of periods, crises in the way that maybe some of others have, and therefore giving them resources and tools and techniques. But definitely one of the issues has been the always on, the balance between your personal life and your work life in a studio apartment. Great empathy for that. So really giving permission to turn it off, giving permission people to take PTO. You got to do it. Yep. And do it, close the computer down and really make sure that you go and take that walk, and that you read the book, and that you shut the news out. I've been a huge advocate for news is in every possible platform and channel. And if you allow that to seep into your life, it can create, exacerbated anxiety. And I think trying to give guidance as to when you should and shouldn't. I talk about my own practices a bit like Serena. I'm saying these are things that I do. This is how I'm, and if it gives a little bit of inspiration into that. But here's the big lesson I'm learning is that, through all this period of darkness, what is incredibly uplifting is through all this stress and is the compassion and the optimism and the good that people have shown. So that's one thing that, and the good is being shown in amazing ways. We have Good Humans Award. Every week we nominate, X number of people, and, it just, and the little vignettes and examples of what they did to help their team members, whether it was onboarding someone, it was helping someone, it was diving in, and it's the most unusual of, it's probably the ones that, where people helped you. And I think that gives, again, further permission. And they're little vignettes. They're not just about me. They're vignettes into people's lives. And I think, says we're all in this. What you're experiencing is what your colleague is as well. So, all of the above.
Beautiful, beautiful. Daniele, how do you remain connected? You brought mental health up first. How do you remain connected? And how do you, there good feedback cycle going on for the people underneath you?
Yeah, sure. It's very much so what Serena and Paul have said. One of the things that I've personally learned over the last 9 weeks is not to stay the course. And I think you guys were just alluding about, the notion of just being vulnerable. We were all coached about, there's always been this misconception that, good leadership is it's all about being steady and consistent and positive. That's how we've been sort of trained and coached. And then you realize that in a moment like this, you just can't be that way, and you don't have to be that way. So, while you want to be optimistic about the future, which I think for the most part we all are, and we're seeing the good side of things, you don't have to be positive all the time. And it's absolutely fine to just to show up on a call and just being, down and just just releasing your emotion, especially in a situation where everything is just done so artificial, if you will, because yes, we're connected through videos, but the most difficult part of our interaction, which is reading body language and feeling people, no longer exists. So you're seeing faces. So the hardest part of your job is still there, but the other is not. And as far as feedback from the team, we've seen that, as humans, I think people have been looking for two things: reassurance and transparency, kind of equally. So if you think of, as an example, that pre-COVID, we were thinking about, millennials being different as far as the generation and fascinating, and that's a whole different topic for another time. Right now, comes after COVID, we're all pretty much the same. We're going through the same phases of emotion within the time frame of just a week, and it's very consistent. And so we've also seen that people have just becoming a lot more flexible and just willing to help, not just people around their local communities, but also just even at work, just raising their hands, being a lot easier to works across their accounts, across their offices, and so that's the feedback that we have seen for the most part. So people are just trying to do their best to just contribute to the greater cause, whether it's the greater cause of the office in your company or just the greater cause of us as just people in our society.
Yeah, great. I think I've found just reaching out. I'll send an IM to people periodically just to check in on them very directly, and I think they while I will say I'm the first to complain about the ding 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 going on in Teams right now, and constant notifications. I think just checking in, hey, how are you? You're doing a great job. I just want to make sure you're okay. And I think that those personal touches are helpful for people just to have a moment of humanity. And I think those things are important.
And Mark, Teams, I think everybody would agree that's been, the biggest blessing that we had, but also the biggest curse, right? Because, got us all so close to each other. But, the second that a really annoying notification come up, and we were just talking about it just before we went live, you just feel obliged, irrespectively of what you're doing, just connect. And as I felt guilty myself of maybe just having to wait too long. When I see that green icon that somebody's active, you're thinking, well, what else is this person is doing? Clearly that person is in the house. And so it's just important right now as we get into week 10, and we know that we're going to have a few more weeks or if not months of sort of status quo, of really sort of parsing that out and just make sure that we leverage and use technology to our advantage and not the opposite.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting that all of a sudden, all of our obligations are sort of 22 inches from our face. It's just so concentrated. It's really a different situation. So you talked, Daniele, you brought up some great bits about some of the positivity in this, and I want to switch gears into that. Let's talk about maybe. Serena, I'll start back with you. What are some of the things that have changed that are going to stick, and ideally, what are the positive ones that we see? Hey, because as we all know, in moments of crisis, they are equally moments of transformation and opportunity, right? So what's different? What's changed that you think it to be super beneficial for us as we move forward?
Well, the biggest thing for me is just my opinion on work from home. Prior to all this, if someone were to come to me and say, can I switch to a full work from home mode, I would have been really skeptical. It was something that I personally never really thought would work. I was less open to it. I thought with our industry, it's all about collaboration. It's all about connection. We need to be physically together to achieve that. That all, this has been the best beta ever if you want to look at the positive sides. Because honestly, while I personally miss being in the office, if we had to go % work from home permanently structure, I know 100% without a doubt it works. And that's been really positive. And I think coming out of this, there will be a good amount of people who are going to want to work from home, and we are very, very, very open to that. Our CEO asked us the other day, the leadership team, is there any situation you can think of where you wouldn't allow someone to work from home once we come out of this? And there wasn't a situation, and our entire leadership team was 100% behind it. So that's been really positive. I think it's going to completely change how we hire. We suddenly, it's not just, especially being in LA, I think we all know it's a small pool that we're all fishing from when it comes to finding good people. And now the pool just opened up. I would have no hesitation if we found somebody great who lived in Kansas and wanted to stay in Kansas.
Great point.
So that's been I think that's been super positive.
Awesome. And I think, we have creative teams, but back in New York, and I think, and I was just on before this, a creative briefing session and a brainstorm session. I think do those in a virtual way, you can do pretty much anything, because those are very interaction driven, and they were and emotional engagement, and so that's phenomenal. Daniele, what do you think? What's changing for the positive?
Yeah, definitely the way in which we do staff plans, as Serena sort of alluded, or we were putting up fights before, especially as local offices, just to make sure that we're getting talents on the ground nearby their account teams, function and disciplines. That's all gone. So I think right now, as we look into the future, probably geographical proximity will become secondary, if not even tertiary, at least for the next couple of years, I would say. Skill sets, and probably most importantly, mitigating impact on people, given the impact on our business that some of us have had, are the factors that will prevail. Then I would say that a much great level of not just collaboration, but maybe even some level of integration amongst our operating companies within the same holding company. Trying to find synergies somehow that would allow us to grow alongside each other, and as a collective, hopefully, Mark, you would agree on that. I think those will definitely, if we've seen shift over the last 2-3 years as to how we work together, and this is not just within the same holding company, but just as an industry, this will just further accelerate it. So I think that's going to be a positive, just under the notion of we're in this together. Ultimately, we're just trying to maintain our business, survive it, and ultimately just trying to protect it as much as possible. So there will be a lot more of us coming together.
Paul, to you, what's going to change? What's going to stick? What's going to be amazing as we move forward?
Yeah, and I'd agree with. I know this is a love fest, and we're all in this together. Actually, I think on an industry level, let me just approach it from there. But I think the parallel will be into our business as well. I think the digitalization, I think it is digital everywhere. I think, the behaviors have fundamentally shifted to it being, across every generation, how grandparents are familiarizing themselves with Zoom and having to be a little bit more connected, and this notion that there were I think we get that, but that's obviously going to impact us as obviously how we respond internally. I think the drive to efficiency, with obviously the economic environment around us, I think that's going to be a factor. I think we're going to, maybe have that pendulum was kind of shifting definitely in the last decade towards the performance. I think we were seeing a little bit of a calibration back. I think it'll move a bit back towards the, efficacy of what we do, business outcomes. I think, the economic environment, the imperative to prove what we do is going to be important externally and internally. Flexibility and speed. Flexibility is going to be the name of the game. Every client, that's, the buzzword, the notion of flexibility in a kind of upfront world. Clients, I mean, how can a client predict where they're going to be in 18 months' time, and how do we respond reciprocally in that environment? So that's going to change everything that we do. Again, the media that have got more flexibility inbuilt into it, guess what? They're going to be winners in this environment. The ones that are going to sit there in their archaic kind of, thrones, having to jump off those thrones. And we're seeing that every day. And, the big other lesson I'm learning is really these actions. Actions speak as loud as the words. I'll put it that way. As opposed to just saying actions louder than words. And what I mean by that is, in this current environment, we can't divorce ourselves from the message. So the medium is obviously critical, the environment but what we do, what the industry does, I mean, I've been so assured by clients who've stepped up and have pivoted away from saying things and actually fundamentally trying to do things in this environment. And I think that's going to be really great. And I think that that's also an important thing that we as leaders have to do. We have to not just talk about things, we have to show vulnerability, transparency, all of these things are really, actions that are going to be imperative. But the net externally is the fact that communications will be forever changed. We're not going to see as much glitz and glamour. I think that's going to be a big creative issue going forward, a messaging issue. But the fact that brands are stepping up and really thinking about what their purpose in life is, I mean, we've been talking about purpose mark for a long time, is going to be really, really important. I think consumers are looking for that. And I think, again, this period has kind of reshaped and where we come out and what will be the rebalance of that. But again, I'm jumping between the external and the internal. I think that's also imperative for leadership. It's imperative for us. It's not, vacuous email from a CEO that's in a foreign, distant land. It's really, actions are going to speak louder than words in terms of how we get out of this, how we reassure people about the re-entry plan. Do we have the right re-entry plans?
Right.
What's the tangibility of those vulnerabilities? Anyway, so I covered a lot of ground, but I'm sure that's similar for all.
Some of the ground you got into, and I think we've been talking about our own operations most of the time, but as we look outwardly in our industry and to the publisher and tech side, what's the biggest change that we expect to take place in the coming months and years, perhaps? There's a lot of discussion about, is there going to be an upfront? Is it going to be the same? I mean, I think certainly we all believe in reserve versus non-reserved, and those principally being different areas. But, are we going to see consolidation? What is it? And I take, we're in a very uncertain environment. But what do you think we're going to see? Serena?
We're going to see a lot more just getting back to basics. I think we've been in the industry for a number of years now. Well, we certainly enjoy the upfronts. I think we've all thought we don't need them. I mean, we don't need the glitz and glamour of them. We all don't need the Slept to Dark and the big dog and pony show. And I think for some time we've thought that there needs to be a change. And, it was interesting now that, they're starting to come back out that, Fox did a 2-minute upfront. And you're almost like, where was that the last 5 years? I mean, I loved it. Yeah, we're not going to come out of this and just go back to the same way everything was. And I do think we're going to, things are going to be more real. They're going to be more authentic, and they're going to be a lot more conscious. People aren't going to want to travel. That's going to be a big thing coming out of this, until there's a vaccine and until we do feel like things are back to normal. Things are going to have to be done, from a video standpoint. I think, we're not going to be hopping on a plane to go to our clients every other week because there's a meeting. And I think we're going to be a lot I don't think we're going to have as many in-person meetings in the office. You know, we're talking about that now. How do we monitor who's coming into the office? How, you know, are we going to let people into the office? You know, it all, you know, all those questions that we're all grappling with, as I know we're all talking about but it is going to be very, very different. And, you know, we're talking about that now. How is it going to be different? I know as an industry, we've always wanted to really think about what is the agency of the future. Yep. And while I know we get bits and bobs of it right, none of us have quite figured out what the agency of the future is. And I think the agency of the future is going to be forced upon us. And we're all really going to have to adapt to a whole new way of working.
Awesome
on all sides.
Awesome perspective. Daniele, what do you think?
To your point, Mark, earlier, we shall see. I think everything is going to center around human interactions, honestly, and how quickly we'll be in kind of like either trying to go back to normal or not. Right now, I don't know about you guys, but every time I watch a movie or a show and somebody is kissing or hugging, handshaking, there's no time that I look at my wife and saying, this is just not going to happen anymore, at least for the next maybe 2 to 3 years, I would say, before eventually we're going to come around. I think for everything else, it's going to be just an acceleration of changes and trends that we're already on their way. Sort of think of something like cash. You know, it's been meant first by checks, then credit cards, then payment apps. Post-COVID, you almost can think of a world where cash is still going to be prevailing. It's almost gross just to think about that. Contactless right now, it's the one word that's part of every single lexicon. Every single restaurant or food apps puts that as a first feature. We'll maybe get to a point, a few years from now, where there will be even sort of cash tax that we'll have to pay if that's the only option that we have, and retailers may even be unequipped or feel antiquated if not able to keep up with new technology as a result of that. I think to Serena's point, travel will obviously be impacted. I think less on a personal level. We as human species will still have to travel and go and see places and people that we care. On the business side, I think that's going to come down at least 70-80%. We've all been used to seeing travel being frozen in Q4, but that's only been for like 3 months. Now we all have a fiscal or a calendar year to assess. And I think COVID, it's less about, I think COVID is going to be the trigger, but once CFOs and management will see that this is going to have and actually how much we're able to do virtually, I can only imagine that travel will only be able to be approved by your CEO or potentially if it's a client mandate. But even that, it's kind of like hard to think right now for a client to ask you to go and visit them. So I think for me, those are going to be like the major changes and what's going to impact us the most.
I want to shift a little bit and move to Paul. How have client behaviors or agendas changed in this moment? It's my observation that clients that live in some state of chaos, this is a very difficult moment. But clients who have a pretty clear roadmap and clear priorities, this is a bit more of a stable moment for them. How do you see?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Well, listen, I think like all of us, at the outset, I think it was the shock to the system. So I think we all know back, 8 to 10 weeks ago, we were all really grappling. We were moving very fast. There were a lot of, mixed signals coming out of every sector, but I think we balanced it. I think that the first thing I would say is that never before have I to all of my clients, and I think the teams, and never before have, the light bulb went off how critical what we do is the largest. And of course, if you do comms planning beyond even the media, it is the totality of spend, but certainly media is the biggest line item. So I think we've shown as an industry, media services has shown how critical it is to that relationship with clients. So I've never seen more engagement, more partnership because there wasn't a roadmap. There wasn't a, yes, I think the collaboration, the kind of to and fro, I think clients saying to us, this is what we're thinking. Can you go and model it out? What do we think? How much might we need to shift? All of those kind of decisions, I felt I mean, of course, what it's done is the downside is that a lot of it has been negative actions initially. We're getting back to more positive actions. But it was summed up by a couple of clients. I did a town hall, and I actually had 2 clients actually videoed little videos so that all gammas could just get their appreciation. But one of the clients really summed it up, saying, you've been in the trenches with us. Each of our decisions have been interoperable. Our partnership has been more than ever. And he said, and he said, the irony is not lost on us as clients, that you've been helping us in such a negative context. And a lot of what you've been doing has, by and large, initially been negative. You know, the negative may have been certain amounts of cancellations or certain amounts of moves or certain amounts of, but what I think is it reaffirmed, I think what we're going to see is a different kind of relationship going forward. Yes, it's going to be a flexible relationship, but those that can be speedier and more flexible and help solve problems. I've always said this. We're not in the media business. We're not in the advertising. Solving problems, everyday business. And never before have we had to solve more problems that we didn't have a roadmap for. So yeah, and I think the clients understand that as well. So I think the clients have shown compassion and vulnerability, and you know, and that has also led to good collaboration. But you're right, you're across different spectrums, and you can't, you know, clients that obviously have been much more severely impacted have obviously had certain responses versus those that, you know, but the nuances are so complex, you know, from messaging to media, to the impact on your P&L, your supply chain, to your retail environments, to how, you know, it's endless. But it's what gets me up and really excited, that part of it. And I hope a constituent within all of our agencies will rise to the challenge. You can't paint by numbers. I mean, I know we couldn't do that for the last decade, but certainly you can't paint by numbers anymore.
Great metaphor for the moment we're in. Serena, how client behaviors changed on your side, and have you adapted?
I mean, I think Paul captured so much of it.
Yeah.
You know, I will say just the overwhelming sense of appreciation. Not to say that our clients didn't appreciate us before. They don't always say it. We don't always feel it. You know, it's always get this done, deliver, and we deliver, and they just expect it. And it's been really nice, and it's been really amazing for the teams to, you know, obviously they're moving every day, especially during those first 3 weeks where we were all scrambling. And the overwhelming amount of appreciation that we're getting from our clients has just been a tonic. But, you know, we haven't had, you just don't, so that's been really nice. It's been really nice.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with that. I mean, I think that's often what our people live for. And
yeah.
It's been good to have positive reception on a lot of the proactive stuff that we've done in this moment. Daniele.
The team has said it already. Yeah, we use the word appreciation. It's acknowledging, it's empathy. You know, we've received videos from clients thanking us. Who felt, you know, we're not even, you know, frontline workers. We're just, you know, buying impressions at the end of the day. But it's the sort of rare dynamics that just before we were not seeing, or we were not thinking about it. And it literally just takes an email, a thank you, or a shout out to an associate or a planner or anybody, just to feel, you know, to feel good about it. And see, I think that's been the biggest change, because ultimately we've all sort of level set as humans. So the whole notion or distinction between an agency, your client, again, that's another one that I feel like, you know, things have sort of recalibrated, and hopefully that will just continue, because there is no call right now that doesn't start really with a how are you, in a very sort of genuine way.
Yeah. All right. I think to bounce to some Q&A, I think, you know, for me, the clients on our side, you know, it's a delicate, they're in a fragile emotional state. And I think our people have needed to operate, you know, with a very specific tone, and not, you know, appreciate the moment at hand. And I think that has led to a lot of emotional bonding, as Serena mentioned, and it has been great. And I do think, to your point, more than ever, they feel like this team's with me. This is my team, and I think that's been good to see, because there hasn't always been, in the past several years, necessarily the most positive dialogue in the press out there, about the relationships, and I think this is helping mend some fences. Perhaps I would hope. Susan, do you want to tackle some Q&A now?
Yeah, great conversation, you guys. Enjoying it. A few questions have come in that I just wanted to make sure we address too. And I think in talking about the client relationship, such an important part of this too. Curious about new business, and what are those challenges as you're pitching new business, and is that happening? If a couple of you could address it, because I hear from some of you that there are pitches happening. What's that like these days?
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to chime in. We've got a couple pitches happening. It's been interesting. You know, I think that's been a really interesting thing from a team standpoint, to do that, all the internal work virtually. And I don't always know if that's working as well. I don't think that's worked quite as well. It's working, but not quite as well as just the general getting the client work out has. I think the presentations have been interesting. It's a little hard to create chemistry and to really get that point of chemistry across when you're presenting over Teams. It's very hard to read the room. You know, it's been interesting. I mean, I've had pitches that have been postponed. So hoping that those will eventually get back on track. But I think we're going to start seeing more new business coming up as people realize that we're going to be in this situation for a while. I think a lot of the postponed pitches will probably back before we're all back and out of our homes. But it's been interesting, and there's been some lessons learned. We need to do a team debrief on a pitch that we just had. You know, that was an interesting one, and, you know, probably not our best showing, but, you know, good considering the circumstances.
Yeah, and I'd chime in and say that it was actually quite a surprise how active it has been. We've been multiple pitches actually, and we had one very early on, and that was you know, we got a lot of the wrinkles out. I mean, everything from, you know, how do you rehearse? Agree with Serena. I've actually found the dialogue with the clients and consultants, but has been actually twofold better. But so as in, you can have, I think everyone's got into more iterative rather than, oh, well, once a week, we're going to give you, you know, you've got to cut, and because you've avoided all that travel in between, please, will you travel here? We're going to come and do a chemistry meet. You know, you can do it iteratively. And I feel like the briefings have been much better. And I think, you know, we've always said, like, get to the best brief, get to the best insights, get to the best, you know, the more access that you can provide both ways, you're going to get a better outcome in a pitch. It's not just a vanity, you know, exam question you're answering. So certainly that's been a positive. But I think we did early experience was, yeah, definitely figuring out your technology. How do you get that balance of the EQ to the IQ? Often it's said that, you know, even though you've got all the scores, you know, it's supposed to be all IQ driven, then someone behind the scenes says, well, I really like that team. I like the chemistry. So how do you build your respect between your members when they're, how do you break the ice? How do you humanize it? The interesting thing though is, because everyone's in their living room, kitchen, bedroom, it's a very human thing. Whereas the sterile corporate boardroom at either our or someone's location actually weirdly doesn't show, you know, your best, you know, real person. So I think there's pros and cons, but we've won some business and we're waiting on some stuff. And but I thought it was going to be wackier than it's been. It's actually, you know, I mean, it's actually been quite enjoyable. I mean, the one thing, I'll tell one tale out of turn, and it was, we were in a Teams environment, we were pitching on Zoom, and someone had actually pulled up we were going through the analytics part of the pitch, and it was, and then, we had a feed going, and the feed popped up.
Oh,
God, and the feed popped up. And thank God it was just one team member talking to the other team member, and it didn't say, and we, you know, it wasn't, but it was just then you go, how did that happen? Because we were in Zoom, but we were working in Teams internally, but it was because we obviously had our, so you've just got to, like, you got to think of every possible conceivable bit of technology, but it was quite innocent. And it did humanize us because we were talking to each other behind the scenes, which of course you can't. The benefit is you can do that. Sorry, the positive, but the negative was, you know, it popped up. Anyway, sorry, it was funny.
I would say probably pictures are probably the only one instances that would actually take us back into the office, just for the reason that you guys have mentioned, like, you know, the coordination amongst your team and the queuing, and sort of that's for us, it's been like, you know, the only downside. You're right, you know, Paul, you can be in the comfort of your kitchen and just, you know, have your notes. It's just cozy. You don't feel the stress of traveling, getting into the meeting room, all of that. But it does require quite a lot of experts, and everything can just go wrong. You know, and we've learned over the last 9 weeks, you know, how to play videos and how to minimize the amount of streaming that you want to put just to, you know, mitigate the risk. The one good side is that, you know, you can actually have a great casting of people from all over the world. You know, travel costs are no longer a hurdle. So we had a pitch that, you know, pre-COVID would have never happened, to have that many representations from all over the globe. And it just actually brought our global footprint to life in a lot more tangible way. So pros and cons. I still haven't necessarily wrapped my head around it, whether I like to do them more virtually. I don't think so. But it's been an interesting experience. Interestingly as well, the North American pipeline, I feel like it's healthier than some of the other regions as well, at least with compared to Europe. It will be interesting to see what's going to happen over the next 6 to 9 months. But so far, it's actually been quite healthy.
I'll chip in. We've been pitching a load lately. I don't know why, but we have. And pick up on something that Paul said. There's some human moments in it that are hard, right? Like if you think through the beginning of a pitch, and one part that I'm particularly fond of is just getting a war room together, and, you know, beginning to get down your thoughts and research and dig in and post ideas and stats and hypotheses on the wall, and to begin to cluster things. I think the process that you go through in doing that, I'm very tactile about that. You know, it's like getting a band together and trying to sort through and create a song. And that's really hard when you're not together. It's hard not to really hear and feel curiosity and all these things that are associated with those dig-in moments at the front end of a pitch that lead to inspiration. And even, you know, one more human moment is just, you know, when you're doing Q&A with a client on a session like this, you know, you're kind of reading off of something, you've got someone in front of you, but you're taking notes. It's really hard to have the body language right, and to read people and do all those things and try and build a connection inside 3 minutes in that type of environment. So I think that part of it's not easy.
Yeah, I agree. A little bit about clients. One of the questions that came through, it talked about the relationships with the rep community, the vendor community, right? That's always been part of the biggest portion of where time is spent. How has that changed?
Ooh.
Are you still taking those meetings? Are you shortening those meetings? How are you meeting with new existing partners and reps?
I'll say oh, go ahead, Serena. I think you were chatting. You're on mute. Oh, Serena, you're on mute.
There, sorry, am I back? We're definitely taking the meetings. I have been surprised at how many meetings the teams have actually been doing. The bigger presentations have been interesting. You know, I think like us, our vendor partners are figuring out how to present their bigger ideas, their bigger platforms, you know, on Teams and on Zoom. So that's been interesting. But yeah, I mean, we have that connection going to have the meetings that we usually would have, but then there's also just this, you want to be aware of this overflow of meetings that seem to be happening. So it's a delicate balance and trying to be aware of people's time.
I would say that, and it's not just with vendors or publishers, just amongst ourselves. We recalibrated the need of having a meeting more so than anything else. So whether it's a publisher or internal meetings, we've just been last 3 to 4 weeks to take meetings. We do definitely want to have publishers just coming to us and just sharing their perspective as to, you know, what sort of the research and the insights that they're running themselves, especially if it's category led, that could actually help us, that may sort of fulfill some of the gaps that we have. So just like the information educational side of what we can actually extrapolate from those meetings, as opposed to just purely just selling, you know, the new capability or the new space or product, have probably been prioritized over the last 10 weeks.
Yeah, I'd agree with what was said. I mean, what I found, I mean, almost to exhaustion, the efficiency of being able to organize meetings. I mean, we all have, you know, literally morning till night. You can pack in a lot when you're sitting in a kitchen or you know, these Zoom meetings, you know, literally back to back and jumping from one to the other, engagement with the leadership on the media owner side and publisher side to be great, because I think there was this kind of, you know, a lot of early check-ins. There was a lot of kind of, again, the same, you know, I've welcomed vulnerable conversations, real honest conversations, not the posturing of us versus you. But I'd say the big rallying cry is that, you know, I mean, I think it's balanced more to the IQ part of it. I mean, the EQ, obviously that whole relationship building, you know, I mean, obviously that whole media community is kind of always tried to balance, and sometimes I think they get it a bit wrong. They try and overemphasize the EQ to the IQ. I think now it's all about solve problems, come with great thinking, bespoke, and it's a kind of English phrase, but like think about not just the generic, I'm touching base and we're all in this together. Yeah, I mean, we've got that empathy part, but, you know, never before, I think it's like, you know, please, you got to really think. There's no hierarchy in the media order at the moment. So, you know, you've got to get to your homework, get to understand the clients, you know, and I agree, you know, everything we said about, you know, less of the pizzazz and all that, you know, the BS in the business. And I think that we're really going to be down to, you know, hard, tangible solutions that are going to help solve problems. And if you have that as your North Star, you know, then you're going to be better off in the way that you engage with agencies and the way that you engage with clients.
Great question. Mark, anything else from you?
I'd say, yeah, and I suppose it's advice on the publisher side, make the best possible use of the time. I mean, you know, we've all talked about how ourselves and our teams are really time strapped in this moment. And I think having a purposeful and meaningful agenda going into a call, and I'll say my pet peeve is saying, hey, I'm going to talk about these 3 things, and then those 3 things are nowhere to be found. You know, making it count, right? And we're all in a difficult moment, and we all need to make it count. That's what I would say.
Incredible. I want to finish here on time, 12 o'clock. Well done, everybody. I just, one last comment too, and a question that came in, it talked about, you know, in a time like this too, those departments like HR and the administrative and IT, those departments really are elevated to essential workers. And so it's interesting to see how culture changes, how everybody has to take on a piece of that as we move ahead. Are you guys seeing that there is kind of a redistribution of roles and responsibilities where everybody's having to pick up a part of like I said, what used to be HR, that's part of your job now, or you're elevating those departments that maybe are on the front lines with clients? How do you see that changing?
Yeah, I think that, I mean, everyone's got a task force. We've got a couple of task forces, and I think that, you know, obviously the central role of HR in those, but I think there's been a great appreciation for people who are in facilities, great appreciation for our legal group. You know, they've been the backbone of a lot of the, you know, the foundational work that we're doing in this. And I think that actually, you know, they're often unsung heroes in all of our lives. I mean, HR is obviously, you know, HR isn't just, you know, recruitment. It's a fundamental part of driving training, enrichment, progression, culture, you know, all of those things, right? You know, I think there's been a great, I think that has actually, you've almost made me think of it, and this is not, I'm post-rationalizing it a little bit, but there's been a huge benefit to the way that, you know, we've appreciated and understood all of the component parts that make organization. And I think, you know, bravo to all those slightly, you know, don't get credited always in the new business win and all the rest of it. So, you know, I think that's been very, very appreciated all the way through the org.
Thank you for that. I want to wrap up. You guys, what a great conversation. I appreciate you all taking time. I know everyone's got stacked up Zoom meetings, so thank you for taking time, for being here today. Thank you for everyone who attended. We've got more great programming coming up. Again, make sure you're signed up for our newsletter. There's going to be a survey that goes out on this. We want to hear back from you. Again, more good programming. If you have ideas, send them our way, because like everybody else, we are learning as we go. We are adapting, and we're ready for change too. So thank you very much for coming out today. Thanks to the panelists, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you, Susan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.